to do. One of the issues that has been troublesome at both the national level as well as at the local level has been the issue of health care. You know, this week, once again, the legislature in Washington is trying to rush through an 844-page immigration bill that they haven't read. I guess, again, buying into the theory that if you read it, it might just confuse you. You have to pass it to find out what's in it. We saw that with Obamacare, and as folks like Ralph Weber have been warning us, as many of those of us who read Obamacare at the time warned at the time, it's not what you think it is. Well, now that we know more about what it is, the challenge is how do we rip it out by its roots? How do we go in and tear it apart and stop it? And it's not just a fight in Washington. It's a fight right here in Tennessee. Ralph Weber was born in Vancouver, Canada, but grew up in Thailand, Nepal, Germany, started a healthcare policy consulting company, has become a leading healthcare policy consultant in the country. His expertise lies in custom designing health plans which significantly reduce cost and which hopefully will reduce the need to comply with the Obamacare compliance cost. He's author of the book Medicrats, Medical Bureaucrats That Rule Your Health and Care, with rats, of course, underlined. And he's also the CEO of MediBid. Ralph Weber is going to talk to us a little bit about how we take back our healthcare freedom.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. Let me just make sure this is on. No. Bob, I can't get this on here. Okay. I'll start with this here. Now, it's great to be here. If you can turn that on. And thank you, Steve, for that introduction. So, wonderful to see such a great crowd. And I'm happy that everybody could make it. Now, Sharon, I did not ask for these chairs. I just wanted to be noted. But I'm kind of nervous about two empty chairs behind me. So, Barack and Joe, I'm sorry. I don't trust you that much, guys. Don't like them behind my back. So, good morning, Tennessee! Good morning. Those of you that are doctors, they weren't mentioned yet. Could you please stand up? Dr. Scott, thank you. There's a few doctors. Great, thank you. Doctors are on the forefront, and most of the doctors are on our side in this battle. There's some very, very fine doctors. Now, because I'm the opener today, which is totally different for me, I usually close. I'm usually the last speaker. So today I'm opening. So I decided that go ahead, Rob, move the slide. Part of Obamacare is about evidence-based medicine, okay, and best practices. Now, what they found, the Obama team found an ophthalmologist in rural Iowa who had cut the rates of glaucoma in half, okay? And the way they found it, they were monitoring his prescriptions that he was giving for glaucoma, and all of a sudden, his prescriptions started going down. And, you know, the big pharmaceuticals warned the Obama team. They said, hey, you know, this guy's not prescribing these expensive drugs. Let's find out what's going on. So they went to study him. Because what they want to do, comparative effectiveness studies, they want to study something that's happening and see if they can replicate it. Okay? Now, the reason I asked the doctors to stand up, the best thing, and I want to start with this, Rob, do you have Kumbaya? Can you play Kumbaya, maybe? You don't? Okay. So we'll just kind of imagine Kumbaya playing. I want to start by talking about the very best part of Obamacare. Because of Obamacare, they've actually been able to cut glaucoma rates in half because they've replicated this. Now, for those of you in the room that are Democrats or rhinos, you can do what I'm about to explain. For those of you that are conservatives, libertarians, talk to your doctor before you do it. Okay? So here is how we can cut glaucoma rates in half. Almost immediately. Take your left finger, poke out your eye. If 311 million people do that simultaneously across the country, glaucoma rates cut in half. That's the best part of Obamacare. It's the only good part. It's kind of a funny story, but I did it to make an illustration, to illustrate a point. There's a lot of things that look good on paper, you know, like poking out your left eye is going to cut your glaucoma rates in half. But in reality, okay, the whole bill, Obamacare, it looks good on paper only because it makes a good fire starter. There's not a single part of it that makes any sense. There's nothing that works. Now, Captain John Smith, I want to start with Captain John Smith. Very, 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 he's one of my many heroes. Captain Smith was, as many of you that have studied history knows, the first governor of the colony of Virginia. Okay? And Captain John Smith, after the killing winter of 1609, when only 50 of the 600 original settlers survived the killing winters, okay, it was a very, very bad winter. Many of the needless deaths were caused by the aristocrats. I'm sorry, my notes got mixed up. By the aristocrats that were unwilling to work. They felt entitled by their position to not work, and it caused many needless deaths. So Captain Smith made an edict. He who does not work shall not eat. And this was the birth of an idea. This gave birth to an idea which would germinate for 167 years and turn into an experiment we would come to call America. He who does not work shall not eat. Okay? That planted the seed. 167 years later, some extremely intelligent people like Jefferson, Washington, Adams sat down and took that idea a few steps further. America is a nation like no other. Other nations are founded based on soil and stone and rock and water. Not America. America is a nation of spirit. It's the spirit, okay? It's not the soil. They can try to take our soil, they can try to take our guns, they can try to take our healthcare freedom, but they will never take our spirit. Now let's start with a brief history of healthcare. We're not going to go through all of these except kind of the red ones. We talked about Captain Smith. The Disabled Seaman Act of 1798 was the first workers' comp program for people that were engaged in foreign trade in the shipping lines. In 1868, the Supreme Court ruled for the first time that insurance is not an act of commerce to be traded and shipped across state lines and could not be regulated under the Commerce Clause. In 1919, the Insurance Monitor, an insurance trade publication, said that you cannot form a product called health insurance because how do you measure the loss of health? Loss of life is easy to measure. You can't measure loss of health. So they said back in 1919 you couldn't do it. 1929, Blue Cross was formed by a hospital association to fill the beds. Okay, so the hospital, I don't know if it was technically the American Hospital Association, but the group of hospitals formed Blue Cross. 10 years later, the group of doctors formed Blue Shield, and Blue Shield was formed so that the doctors could receive regular pay and prepaid health. In 1944, the Supreme Court overturned its previous ruling and said, yes, you can regulate insurance under the Commerce Clause. The states rebelled. And 1 year later, in 1945, the McCarran-Ferguson Act was passed. Now let's talk about that for a minute. McCarran-Ferguson Act has not been properly repealed by Obamacare. It still has teeth. Okay? The McCarran-Ferguson Act is the act which gives the states the right and the authority to regulate insurance. within their states. And we can still use that at the state level. It still has some teeth. Some of them have been pulled, okay, but it's still got some teeth. In 1954, of course, during the war, there was a wage freeze so that employers couldn't increase wages to attract workers. So in 1954, the IRS made health insurance tax deductible. And from that time on, the cost of health insurance has greatly outpaced, the health insurance inflation has greatly outpaced wage inflation because of that act. 1965, the government decided they wanted to compete with private industry for offering insurance, and they started Medicare and Medicaid. 1973, again, this is a red one. We're going to talk about this for a minute. The HMO Act was passed in 1973, and it was very, very, very significant. What the HMO Act did is it changed the product that we purchase. Prior to 73, the product was medical care. Okay, you went to your doctor. For those of you that are old enough to have turned on the high beam with your left foot, you probably remember when you should go to the doctor and you say, hey, my knee hurts. And the doctor said, well, let's take an x-ray. Take a couple aspirin. We'll see you in the morning. Now the conversation is, hey, doc, my knee hurts. What am I covered for? Well, who's your coverage with? Wrong conversation. Today, we buy health care. Prior to 73, we bought medical care. So what is health care? What is health care? That's a key question. It's a very, very important question that has never been defined by Congress before they started meddling. Okay? They started meddling and they started to solve the health care crisis before they even knew what it was. When we bought medical care, we bought cars the same way. Okay? We'd go down, the sticker price would be on the window, and you'd haggle over that. We bought medical care the same way. And you'd get your medical care. Health care today consists of a series of payments, premiums to finance medical care. Now, as we have learned, since we passed it and read it, and as the Catholic Church has found out, it pays for contraception, abortion, pays for wigs for cancer patients, maternity care, drug counseling for junkies. It pays for a whole bunch of stuff that we might not buy if we were buying medical care. So they put all this stuff in it, and they change the product. Now, health care, the cost of health care is based on the cost of medical care, but we've got all of these other things in there that inflates it. So that was a very, very large mistake. 1974, of course, HIPAA was passed. And for those of you, doctors' offices are required to show you the HIPAA statement when you go in, but you are not required to sign it. Okay? HIPAA is the biggest violation of medical privacy ever. Okay? Doctors are required to show it to you, okay, but you're not required to sign it. 1994, of course, Hillary Care was defeated, and then ERISA was passed. Now, this is also very significant, because I'm going to show you a chart in a little while that shows you what started happening in 1994, okay? It was the start of an army of medocrats and the growth of this malignant army. Of course, in 2010, Obamacare was passed, and in 2010, Supreme Court ruled that Obamacare was constitutional, and this is how they looked at the bill. This is John Roberts. He said it's just a tax, okay? So this was the basis of the Supreme Court ruling, and that it was a choice of just a tax. Where does it say it's going to reduce the cost? Nowhere. Nowhere. It's not designed to reduce the cost. There's no part of it that reduces the cost. Every part of it increases the cost. So let's go on to a simplified diagram of how Obamacare really works. Now, let's see. Up in the top left, it has the president there. And now, what's really interesting, if you look very, very closely at the top left, what you'll see is, let me see, what is it in the top left? Section 2718. Okay. Now, of course, Obamacare has started part of the bill, and it's in 5207, 5208, 5209, 5210, talks about the establishment of a health care service corps that is funded this year by $700 million. Okay, this is that private army that he said should be as powerful as the military. Next year, $900 million for this private service corps and the Ready Reserve Corps. Okay, this healthcare army. What do we need that? I mean, who are they? Are they the ones buying the billions of rounds of ammunition? I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. Okay, 5210. 2718. Now this is also very, 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 very important. Okay. 2718 is the medical loss ratio ruling. What it says is that health insurance companies have to spend between 80 and 85% of your premium in the year that you pay them on medical care. Okay? So the Democrats want us to think that this monstrosity was passed so that more people were covered. And they said, well, it's kind of like car insurance. You know, you need car insurance to indemnify yourself. Well, number one, car insurance is only mandatory in 47 states, but it's only when you drive on the public roads. You drive on your back 40, you don't need car insurance. So, you know, that's not a valid argument. But here's the more important part. Since you have to buy this private product, which has to spend 80 to 85% on medical care, supplies, and services, really, Obamacare is a bill that forces us to consume medical care. Okay? It forces us to consume medical care. Very, very interesting point. Now, is there anybody out here, I know there are some, how many people have received a robocall from your insurance company saying you can get a colonoscopy, you can get a pap smear, you can get a mammogram? Has anybody had that happen? I have. Yeah, a few people have, okay? They want you to consume medical services because with this medical loss ratio, life insurance companies and car insurance companies make money by having your money for decades. Health insurance companies have your money for maybe 13, 14 months. They can't make interest earnings on that, so they need you to use it. And they need you to use more expensive services. Okay? So they're calling people up. They're calling the bad customers that don't use medical care services and say, hey, you're eligible for a pap smear, colonoscopy. You know, come, would you like us to call your doctor for you, make an appointment? It's really, really, really intrusive. One of the many that Obamacare doubles down on a system that really didn't work that well before. And it just doubles down on it, and it forces consumption, and it increases that. An article was written about 5-6 weeks ago called A Bitter Pill, and it talks about the problems. Now, I totally disagree with Steve Brill's conclusion, which is for more government medicine. But he identifies the problem really well. He talks about the fact that Congress addressed the symptoms of the healthcare crisis, not the problems, and certainly not the causes. And he did make a good job of explaining why healthcare is so expensive, due to the charge master prices and the repricing and the downcoding and the 14,193 CPT codes, which, by the way, once they pass ICD-10, switches to a simplified system of 140,000 ICD-10 codes. Okay? Now, Tom, I know you've seen my pictures of my chicken house. Did you know ICD-10 has 29 codes for injury by a chicken? Yeah. Okay, so that's going to make it much more simple for doctors' offices to manage. So the problem is healthcare was expensive and a lot of people didn't want to buy it. And the regulations that have been passed since. Now, they want us to believe that the preferred provider organizations, the PPOs, they want us to believe that they get discounts. They want us to believe that they go out there and they beat up the doctors in the hospitals and say, hey, doc, you know, it's kind of expensive. Give us a discount, okay? That's smoke and mirrors. We know that. That's bogus. It's kind of like Macy's marking everything up in October and then having a Black Friday sale, okay? The discounts are bogus, okay? And you have companies competing against each other by saying, oh, we have better discounts. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. If you want a really, really good discounts, my books outside are regular $15,000, but I'll give you a 99.9% discount. Okay, discount, we know that discounts are bogus. one of the many things that makes it expensive is all the administrative burden, all the Medicrats have created, okay, by pricing and repricing, so they have to mark them up before they're marked down. Now, transparency is very important. In the San Francisco Bay Area, I studied the cost of 5 procedures. Colonoscopy ranged from $887 to $8,650. Knee scope from $3,300 to $32,000. You know, ratios of 9 to 1, 10 to 1, 4 to 1. So you have these huge ratios. Within, you know, a commercial insurance product, you have no transparency. You don't see which facility you're going to. Now, most of these are facility fees. Most of the cost is facility fees, not the actual doctor's fee. Transparency alone takes up 15 to 20% of your healthcare dollar. Now, here's the picture I was telling you about, 1994. You see it there in 1994? What started happening? Look at the growth of physicians versus administrators from 1970 to 2009. If your town had 10 doctors and 25 healthcare administrators in 1970, then by 2009, it had 25 doctors and 750 healthcare administrators. Okay? I wonder why healthcare. Okay? This bill that they passed just feeds that. It creates the complication. Okay? That probably takes up about 35-40% of our healthcare dollars, all this administrative waste. The average doctor's office now, today, I would say conservatively needs about 12 people per doctor just to do the paperwork. Okay? It used to be, I mean, I'm not saying you could ever have done without, but 1 or 2, that's fine. You know, a receptionist and maybe a nurse, that's fine. But 13 people administrating for each doctor, just filling out the forms, trying to get paid? It's ridiculous. So who benefits? Who benefits from this? The Medicrats do. Okay? Now, let me explain what Medicrats are. Very important. I studied Latin in school for 7 years, and, you know, I'm looking at words like, you know, when I'm writing about healthcare, I was thinking about healthcare bureaucrats. But bureaucrat, to me, it's a hard word to spell. I always stumble over that word trying to spell it. I always spell it. Spell check, I spell it so bad, spell check can't even figure out what I'm trying to say. Okay? So, and I look at words like autocrat, aristocrat, bureaucrat, democrat, and what's all this crat? What's all this crat about? Now, I looked up in my Latin English dictionary, crat comes from the Latin word kratia, which means to rule. Okay? So a medicrat is a medical ruler, a medical bureaucrat that controls our health care. So this whole thing is about controlling our health, period. Not health care. It's about controlling our health. And it's about enriching this army of medicrats that are going to do that. So what did Congress do when they passed Obamacare? There's a bit of movie made about it that describes it pretty well. They passed it for 2 reasons. Okay? The first reason was to see what was in it. Okay? And the second reason was to control us. Everybody that has studied Marxism and socialism and fascism knows the best way to control a population is control the access to medical care. Our most basic, fundamental property right is the right to our own body. And they're going to control that. Okay? The best way to control a population. So, I want to talk about just easy solutions, how you can take back your health care, and wrap it up. Okay. The number one thing we have to do is remove all these medicrats from healthcare, all these bureaucrats, all these, you know, paper pushers. Not that there's no need for any of them, but there's no need for a 12-to-1 ratio. Very important, and I know the doctors in this room will agree, we need to reestablish the doctor-patient relationship. There is nothing more sanctimonious than the doctor-patient relationship, and that has been destroyed. Now, I don't like using words like require, but I do use them twice in my 10 points here. I think we need to require transparency in hospital billing and allow transparency of third-party payer charges. Doctors have gag orders. Once they sign a PPO contract, they have a gag order. They can't actually tell you how much they're paid. Okay? And the PPO usually carves out 7.5% to 9% before they pay you. But that's a whole other discussion that we don't have time for today. So the next one, of course, is require hospitals to produce an invoice 48 hours before admission that shows what your charges will be. When you take your car in, they say, well, our shop it's $95. I think it's the transmission if it is, blah, blah, blah. Okay? No reason a hospital can't do that. Allow doctors to perform charity care and compete across state lines. Encourage, now this is an important one, encourage faith-based exemptions, such as Samaritan Ministries. Okay? The Samaritan Ministries people are exempt from Obamacare. They pay cash for all of their care, and there's 80,000 Samaritan Ministries members today. That's grown from about 12,000 before, just not too long before Obamacare. Okay? Now, the state can also take advantage of some of those exemptions. And encourage hospitals to issue a 1099 for uncompensated care. The hospitals always talk about not being paid, getting stiff with a bill. Okay? They can write that off and issue a 1099. That's an easy one. That's a no-brainer. Products like critical illness insurance that pay you a lump sum of cash, $25,000, $100,000, $500,000, so you can get any kind of medical care you want. Or you can go on a cruise around the world until you drop dead and push you over. Okay? Health plans which don't use PPOs. PPOs increase the cost of care. They do not reduce it. And use health plans with monthly, not annual deductibles. Very important. Now, the question is, can Republicans compromise? Okay? I want to read you a quote and see if anybody knows who said this. In any compromise between food and poison, only death can win. In any compromise between good and evil, it is only evil that will profit. Compromise is not an option. Compromise is not an option. We have to win this. So as I come to a close, I want you to remember two things. Number one, he who does not work shall not eat. And number two, in any compromise between food and poison, it is only death that can win. And any compromise between good and evil, only evil will profit. Thank you very much.
And standing ovations from both Joe Biden and Barack Obama. I might